Right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest in a series, a very successful series of European Movement in Scotland webinars, which we've been having in the last few months, notably, obviously, in the last year, since we've all been confined to our homes, or more or less a lot of the time. My name's David Gow. I'm a member of the executive of the European Movement in Scotland, and I also look after, edit our website. I'm a former Guardian correspondent in Brussels for many years, several times over, and I used to edit Social Europe, and I now edit a magazine, an online current affairs and culture magazine called Skeptical Scot. Anyway, so tonight we're going to be discussing, and it's all very, very germane to what's going on. We're going to be discussing, and it's a theme which we've been pursuing over the last few months as well, which is Scotland's relations with the wider world, particularly with Europe, and particularly we're going to home in on our relations with the European Movement International. We're very lucky to have two very prominent members of the European Movement International with us. So we're going to talk about how we can take part in their work, how they can help us as we pursue the ever closer links with Europe as a whole, and with the European Union in particular. And it's this week, of course, we have been consumed by the last week by the latest fallout in the ongoing saga between Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon. But that has come to a temporary halt. Although if you want to find out what the EU thinks about it, you might look at at a site run by our friend Kirsty Hughes on the Scottish Centre for European Relations, where she's done a piece there upon. And today, there was a kind of significant move on the moves where the European Parliament, I think, has approved the kind of go-ahead for the certain numbers of the Conference on the Future of Europe, and the EMI had its own discussion there, in which it was very much talking about the role of groups like the EMI and others, and citizens and civil society as whole, and how it can get involved in the Conference on the Future of Europe, which is supposed to kick off, I think, on Europe Day on the 9th of May. And will be, and the hope is that it will not end up as another of these Brussels occasions, like several reports. None of you, I think, will remember the great report written by the former Prime Minister of Spain, Felipe González. I don't think even he remembers it, although he wrote it. Anyway, and of course, we've also, it's very interesting, I'm very pleased that we have Noelle O'Connell with us from Ireland, as well as the EMI, because of course, we've learned this week very much the importance of maintaining the very good relations with the EU, although unfortunately we're no longer part of it. In the latest spat over the Northern Ireland Protocol, and which we may talk about. In fact, I'm certain we will be talking about. And the fact that the European Parliament, for example, today has said that it will not now ratify the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. It was due to be ratified by them on the 25th of March, and they've now put that off. So anyway, so plenty to talk about. Anyway, so shall we just a few bits of advice on housekeeping and things. If you could, when it comes to the question and answer session, if you could put your questions in the question and answer session, box, as it were, at the bottom of your screen, or if you could, or you could always use the chat, but frankly, it would be better for us if you could put it in the Q&A box. Anyway, so we look forward to that, to hearing your questions and having a big discussion later on. So, but with, I think we'll start now straight away and hear from Noelle O'Connell. And thank you very much for coming along tonight, Noelle, who has been chief executive of the European Movement Ireland since 2011, so for 10 years. And after a very distinguished career across, as she put, across multiple sectors, and and she does have, and she's also vice president, recently elected vice president of the EMI itself. And she's got some very distinguished. She's been recognised with the Ordre National du Mérite in France, and she also has a very strong links with Edinburgh in a way, because she achieved, I gather, an MSc in international relations at the university here. So anyway, over to you, Noelle. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about EMI, what it is, EM Ireland too, and how we as Scots can link with you both as Europeans and as an Irish person as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Mark, Niamh, Caitlin, European Movement Scotland, and delighted to be joined on this panel with my good friend and colleague, Richard Morris as well. So thank you very much for the invitation to be here, to be joining you virtually from a pretty damp Dublin. My preference, of course, David, as I said earlier, would obviously be to be physically there in Edinburgh, a place I have a lot of graw for, having had the fortune to do my master's in international relations in Edinburgh, and having spent a really great year there, and having also spoken at a couple of events over the years in Scotland. But these are the times we are living in, and I just saw recently that Ireland has one of the longest lockdown COVID pandemic regimes across Europe. So we're currently not allowed to go past 5 kilometers. So I think it's 167 days of non-grocery stores being open and things. So it's pretty, it's difficult times, but I hope everyone is keeping well and safe. From my perspective, maybe what I might try and do is just talk a little bit about my role as Vice President of EM International, what it is. Also just talk a little bit about European Movement Ireland and that link and connection between Scotland and the wider European movement and Scotland more broadly. Just maybe starting off, I might start off, David, as you mentioned, from an Irish perspective, I've been the CEO of European Movement Ireland coming up to 10 years. And we have always collaborated and enjoyed great connections and engagement with EMiS. And we work very closely across the wider 2 islands, really, in terms of our European movements. Structure-wise, we might be a little bit different to some of the other European movements, but as I keep pointing out to our international colleagues, the European Movement UK has the largest membership, and that level of support and engagement that you have in Scotland as well is fantastic to see, that vibrancy that doesn't exist necessarily across all the other European movements. So if there is a Brexit dividend and a Brexit bounce in a sad context, because obviously we in Ireland certainly did not want the Brexit results or the referendum to go the way it did, but it's really encouraging in another way to see that level of interest and engagement and support there. From an Irish perspective, we are a membership organisation. We have everyone from students to individuals to NGOs to civil society groups to corporate members involved. And we also carry out a series of projects and work on behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs here in Ireland. We work very closely and compete for projects and tenders with the European Commission and the European Parliament. And we have recently got a 3-year programme to work on the Conference on the Future of Europe nationally here in Ireland, and to feed that back in across the different EU member states, but also institutionally. And what that involves is following on from our series of town hall citizen dialogue events that we did over the last number of years around the country, and taking that to the next level and feeding that back in. So that is that is just a little bit of a snapshot of what we do, and I think she's on the call. But we did a fantastic collaboration with Vanessa previously with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, where we did a series of the Brexit referendum and the two islands events. So we looked, we did a really great event in Dublin. We also did an event where it was fantastic. Had the opportunity to speak in Holyrood in the Parliament there, and you know, that collaboration and that great relationship is there, and I really want that to continue to grow and go from strength to strength. And as ever, except on the rugby pitch, you always have a friend in Ireland, to all our Scottish friends in that regard. Now, if I may, turning to my EM International hat. Yes, so along with Richard, we were both elected to the board of EM International last November at the Federal Assembly, which unfortunately didn't take place in, I think it was meant to be, oh, it was in Berlin, actually. It was meant to be in Berlin, but it was all done virtually. And I was elected one of the vice presidents. So there are 6 vice presidents of the organization. 3 of them come from national councils. So for example, like European Movement Ireland, European Movement Germany, and European Movement France. And then 3 of them come from international membership associations. So for example, municipal authorities, the European trade unions, or various other international bodies, or the Young European Federalists. Our president is a Bulgarian MEP from the EPP party, Eva Panova-Majdal, and then there is the board that Richard is on as well, and then we have a secretariat with I think we're up at 34 national councils and over 40 different, you know, associations and membership organizations. So we have to hold on to the fact, and I suppose continue to remind ourselves, that we are part of the largest pro-European civil society membership organization, and that's a really big part of what we do and what we try and do, and promote greater EU connection and greater European connections and engagement. And I don't know if you can see it behind me there, but that is just that is oh, you really can't, apologies, the lighting, my lighting structure isn't great, but that's the front page of the Irish Times, talking about the day in 1954 when our organization was founded. And it was to, you know, to promote greater unity and peace and connections between all the nations of Europe. So that's a little bit of our fundamental overarching principles. And what I would suggest from a Scotland perspective, a big part of the work that European Movement International is going to be focusing on is the whole area of the Conference of the Future of Europe. And from my perspective, I think this is really important, and I think this is a big opportunity as well for Scotland. As I mentioned, I was elected one of the vice presidents representing the national councils, and that I see that I have an important role to play to give a perspective of that national council, of a member state, of perhaps one of the smaller ones and one of the most geographically peripheral ones. And I really think it's important to use my voice in advocating and representing those who may not necessarily always be heard the loudest. So through the structures of EM International, there are political committees. I co-chair the Political Committee 3, which is the EU and the world, that Richard sits on as well. And I think Scotland has a role and a voice that it can play in terms of inputting into how we look to define and shape not only the role and the position for the EU, but for Europe and for relations more broadly with those inside and outside of the EU in the future. I'm not going to pretend we are still, well, I'm still trying to, get my head around the fact that I suppose, how do we, it's very sad. It is that little bit like a divorce and a breakup, and that suddenly, that you're not part of the EU. And that's why I'm very keen and very determined to continue to ensure that EU and EU-UK relations continue to be discussed, that voices like Scottish voices, Northern Irish voices, Welsh, English, the pro-European voices are still represented and still are still heard. That's not always easy, and I think I have to be honest and frank and say that as a friend within the wider European movement family. I don't know if Richard feels the same, but having been around the wider European Movement International family for many years, I did feel in a little bit of a lonely position sometimes in terms of trying to focus attention on Brexit, focus attention on the referendum before it happened, because the UK was seen sometimes as that disruptive partner, a little bit disinterested and disengaged. So for me, I was very anxious and determined to ensure that that wasn't necessarily always the case, and that those who wanted to continue to advocate for the UK to remain in the EU and have that voice and that perspective heard, I am and was and will continue to be determined to facilitate and ensure that voice and is heard and facilitated. And I think in Scotland, there's a lot of warmth and affection and recognition and acknowledgement and understanding of the results and the vote, and the fact that Scotland did not vote to leave the EU, and that I think is recognised on this side as well of the Irish Sea. So in terms of looking at what role I think, David, that you, Mark, Niamh, and all your colleagues in European Movement Scotland can play in the wider European Movement International. And I think the last time I was in Scotland, I said this point as well, and I'm going to reiterate it, but it's don't allow us to forget about you. Okay, so don't allow us to don't slip off the radar. Constructively engage and put forward the Scottish perspective. Keep reminding both friends and stakeholders and your wider network and your wider stakeholder basis of your perspective, some of your priorities, your concerns. What is your roadmap? I'm really looking forward to Mark's speech and some of the Q&A. Really happy to do a sense check and take a stock take on what the view on the ground is in Scotland. We're really fortunate here in Ireland that the Scottish Government Office has a very strong connection with us. We work very closely with them. John Webster is the Scottish Government representative here, and he's doing a fantastic job. So there are really strong binds that connect us and that tie us, and obviously Ireland and Scotland have that special connection. And I think there is an opportunity for you to bring that to perhaps the wider European Movement International perspective, and to get involved. The political committees, as Richard knows, we always are welcome people's input and people's contribution in terms of how we advocate and how we shape the messaging and the positioning that the wider European Movement International takes on a plethora of topics and policies and issues as diverse as EU-China relations, EU-Russia relations, the Transatlantic Alliance, and EU-UK relations. From my perspective, I'm absolutely delighted that Richard is on the board of EM International with me, because there are two of us then able to knowledgeably proactively advocate for continued close EU-UK dialogue and conversation. And, you know, under my watch, Brexit will not, I'm sorry to use the shorthand, but it's just easier. Post-Brexit, the TCA withdrawal agreement, the protocol, all those topics, I am determined that they will continue to get focus and priority as they should. So I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that's given you a little bit of a quick whistle-stop tour on some EM International and EM Ireland overviews, and really happy to answer any questions at the end when all the speakers have done. But thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, and thank you very, very much, Noelle, for kicking us off in such a positive way and for such an interesting way. I think a lot of us here are great admirers of what the Irish have achieved, notably since 1973. I mean, it's hard to imagine here that Ireland, for example, not only has has a commissioner in Mairead McGuinness, but also the chairman of the Euro group within the Eurozone, or Pascal Donahue, and also the head of the European Medicines Agency, just to mention three. So we look forward to being able to maybe do that in future, who knows. Right, now, thank you very much. And as you said, you work very closely with Richard Morris, and Richard has, like yourself actually, has a very wide, diverse background. We've got two Renaissance people here, clearly, and has worked a lot at the moment, I think in particular in the education sector, in voluntary organizations. And you've been a member, well, you did a rather quite a good job, I believe, as a Lib Dem candidate in Tunbridge and Malling, which is about almost as close to Europe as you could possibly get, mainland Europe as you could possibly get, in 2019. And you've been on the executive of the European Movement UK for the past 3 years. And you're also, as you say, you now have a 3-year term as the sole UK member on the board of the EMI. So perhaps you could tell us a bit from your perspective how EM UK sees relations with the EMI and with Europe as a whole, and the EU, but also, you know, any role you could see for us in EMiS and for Scotland. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, David, and many thanks also to Mark for this invitation to speak, and a great pleasure to work again with Noelle, because as she said, we have worked quite closely together on EMI matters in recent months. And there is something very special, of course, about the relationship between the UK and Ireland, as there is between the England and Scotland. I mean, it is, we have obviously very, very special relationships. Of course, the huge difference between where I stand and where Noelle stands is that she's in the EU and I'm out, with immense sadness. And it is an extraordinary situation to be a member of a board concerned with Europe, where I'm, I suppose, the only person on the board who is representing a country outside the EU, which makes it particularly nice to have a friend in Ireland. But it is very extraordinary, and it's so odd almost to feel apologetic for being where I am on the board. And I think it's an enormous tribute to the European Movement International that it has the breadth of vision to see that it is concerned not exclusively with the EU, it's concerned with the well-being of Europe. And I think generally there is a sort of breadth of imagination and a breadth of vision in Brussels, which is most sadly lacking, certainly throughout England and parts of the UK at the present time. I mean, I was particularly struck recently when Noelle organized a wonderful webinar, and invited Michel Barnier to come and talk, which Noelle hosted brilliantly, and which involved the Taoiseach and Simon Coveney, and I think other leading Irish politicians, and the strength of the relationship that emerged between Barnier and the way he expressed himself, and the way the leading Irish politicians expressed themselves, almost made me weep for sadness at what the UK is missing out on. It was really a very moving webinar. Just a few words about EM UK itself, which many of you will know all about. We are indeed possibly the largest, ironically, the largest pro-European movement in Europe, a national movement within Europe, with about now continuously growing, I'm pleased to say, up to about 12,000 members now. That quite big increases literally over the last 2 or 3 months, with about 120 branches around the country. And we organize ourselves with a national council, which is made up of about 35 people, and then a national executive, which is a smaller group, of which I'm a member. I'm a member of the National Council as well, which I suppose is more like the executive arm of the National Council, and which is chaired by the chair of the movement. It's a particularly exciting time at the moment, as probably many of you know. Stephen Dorrell, our chair, has decided to stand down after 4 years exceptional service, in which he really led everything the European movement did in relation to trying to stop Brexit, but feels it's now the time for a new helmsman. And actually this Saturday, we're making the final decision on who the new chair of the European Movement UK should be. As it happens, I'm on the nominations committee, and I can tell you we are down to a short list of 3 people of exceptional distinction. And please just watch this space from Saturday onwards. I was also deeply involved actually in the appointment of our new chief executive officer, who's been with us just a few months, Anna Bird, who's made a cracking start and really got things moving in many, many ways. So I'm very confident about the future of EM UK with this new team. I mean, in just a sentence or two, what our work has been focused on is to rejoin the European mainstream, not knowing, of course, exactly what Europe will look like at the time that we're politically able to rejoin, whether the EU will be exactly in its current state. So we tend to refer to either rejoining the heart of Europe or rejoining the European mainstream when it is politically possible, and to start immediately the process of brick by brick rebuilding relationships with Europe right across the canvas and working with all interested parties. So that is very broadly where we are. We obviously view the TCA, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, with enormous care and are watching exactly what's happening and ready to hold the government to account for all the damage that is already ensuing from this disastrous Brexit decision. So let me just go across now to the European Movement International. I got to say, I feel very, very privileged to be on its board, despite Brexit. Just to add a tiny bit to what Noelle has already said, the European Movement International, what it actually does is to coordinate opinion. And it seems to me that it coordinates public opinion and civil society opinion right across Europe, formulates policy on the back of that opinion, mainly through the work of 3 political committees, and then uses the outcomes to lobby and argue with the 3 main European institutions, the Parliament, the Commission, and the Council. And in all that process, of course, it uses events and webinars, distinguished speakers, and all normal activities. I'm delighted that at EMUK, we are represented actually on all three political committees. Richard Corbett, former leader of the Labour Party in Europe, in the European Union, in the European Parliament, is on PC2, Political Committee 2, Political Committee 1, which is concerned with citizen participation, democracy, and the fundamental values of the European Union. Andrew Adonis sits on Political Committee 2, which is about a social, sustainable, creative, and prosperous Europe. And I sit under Noelle's chairmanship on PC3, as she mentioned, which is about Europe's proactive, outgoing relations with the rest of the world. Now, if you ask me what is my biggest impression from having this rather privileged position in Brussels, it is to perceive the different perspective between Brussels and the UK. As I mentioned, we have been so focused on Brexit, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and now possibly rejoining, that we are myopic, frankly, in the UK about all the other mega issues which our European counterparts face and debate about, and for which we should have an equal responsibility. And of course, I'm talking about all of the sort of issues which come through these political committees, whether it's environmental matters, climate matters, young people, the pillar of social rights, the pandemics, whether it's about economic regeneration across Europe, relations between Europe and China and Africa and the USA, and now, of course, the UK. None of these things is the UK really fully participating in the way that it did when it was a member of the EU. And so from Brussels' perspective, things like the Trade and Cooperation Agreement are a sort of background continuum, whilst they actually focus on bigger, more important, more urgent, and more immediate matters. And of course, one comes back to the UK, one comes back to the UK and sees that the UK media, UK Parliament, the UK activist groups are still really only focused on issues of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and brick by brick rejoining. And I feel that my main role at EMI and the main reason for participating in EMI is for us to encourage people to take off the blinkers and become aware and share in all of these vitally important issues which our European counterparts take full responsibility for. We are, of course, whether we're EMUK or EM Scotland, we are committed to the very closest links to Europe. And it's very odd, it seems to me, that if this is what we exist to do, for us not to show and maintain interest in all these European issues is very odd. Why do we actually want to even rejoin Europe if we're not totally committed to working with our European counterparts on all these much wider issues? And I think we can almost be an example across the UK and certainly to the UK government of what real commitment to these wider issues, pan-European issues, means. So I see Brexit as not only deeply damaging to the UK, I see it as a neglecting of our international responsibilities and, frankly, a retreat from the world. I mean, just to give a few examples of the sort of issues which we ought to be totally involved in, which are so important to us as well as to other Europeans. And of course, the pandemics. We had this enormous success with the vaccines, all credit to the government and to the agencies involved in that. But we should have been sharing the success with our European counterparts. And we should have been benefiting from all the things that they did properly. Then there's, of course, all the issues of economic recovery, where the Europeans are looking in a splendidly pan-European way at mutual support to ensure economic recovery across Europe, whilst we focus under growing and growing difficulties because of Brexit on our own small island. Migration, we've completely neglected our responsibilities in regard to the huge issues of migration, which are going to come up over the next 5-10 years. We're preventing freedom of movement. Our professionals, our creative people ought to be able to move freely across Europe, whatever happens in other contexts. And it is extraordinary that in not, for example, joining the Erasmus scheme, that we are not welcoming people to these shores who can bring an enormous amount to the UK and who would then have a great loyalty to the UK to take back to their own countries. So there are so many pan-European things which I think we as European movements ought to be getting our members, encouraging our members to be deeply involved in, irrespective of the fact that we are no longer members of the EU. We should have the breadth of vision to think about the future of Europe in the same way that, that the European Movement International is doing, and indeed the Conference on the Future of Europe is doing. So all these things are debated through at EMI, the European Movement International, and the board, and through its political committees. And of course, at this particular moment, as Noelle also referred to, all of these issues come together in this cross-cutting question, or cross-cutting matter, the Conference on the Future of Europe. And this is a wonderful and not quite unique, but very important opportunity for all of us to participate in the shaping of the future of Europe. And again, it's wonderful that the European institutions and the other organizers of the conference in no way want to limit participation just to EU members. We are most welcome, and we should seize it with both hands. So what are we doing finally, just at EM UK in regard to our members? I think we're at early stages at the moment. We are putting out a survey very shortly, and Bird will putting out a survey to all our members to try to identify which of our members do have a really strong desire for the sort of engagement I've been talking about. And I think we will end up creating a discrete mailing list of all those members who share these sort of views and want to participate. And certainly I will try to keep that group very, very constantly informed as to what's happening at EMI and its political committees and its board. And no doubt Richard Corbett and Andrew Adonis will do so too. And we will then, I think, move, I hope, to some online events and conferences and discussions, and absolutely encouraging input from all our members who are interested into to contribute to the future of Europe. And the conference will invite that, and special events will be set up to enable members to participate and really to contribute to the way that the future develops across Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Richard. Yeah, for that wide perspective on the work that's being done, and particularly for the positive, also for the positive tone you adopted towards, you know, and EMiS as a whole is adopting towards relations with the EU, which I think we can just mirror here, you know, both as EMiS and I think within the wider Scotland itself, which brings me neatly on to Mark Lazarovich, our final speaker, as it were, and who is well known to, I would imagine, to a lot of people here, but Mark is chair of the European Movement in Scotland, and is extremely active. He's in that role, and also as chairs a citizen rights project, which is very interested in the interests and lives of EU 27 nationals living in Scotland, where they are very welcome because of the particular role that they play, both culturally, economically, socially, in every other which way. And Mark is a former Labour MP and is a lawyer, an advocate, and has a lot of experience in Europe itself. So, Mark, over to you to explain more about what the EU is seeking from its relations with EMI, and indeed with Europe as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you again, Noelle and Rich, for taking part in this event. There's already been quite a lot come out for discussion and Q&A so far, which almost makes me want to start again from the comments I had prepared, but I won't do that too much. And what I want to do is really respond to some of those comments from the Q&A, particularly to what our speakers have said, and make one or two suggestions, partly for ourselves in Scotland, how we can do more to take part in the discussions which Richard and Noelle have talked about, and also make one or two comments which perhaps a little bit cheekily, but towards the European Movement International, and how perhaps make some suggestions for how that might go forward, learning from some of our experiences here, not just in Scotland, but in the UK. Initially, I want to just deal with two preliminary points. First of all, just for those who aren't aware entirely of the relationship between European Movement in Scotland and UK and European Movement International. The European Movement in Scotland is an independent organisation. We are have our own membership. We have a very good relationship though with the European Movement UK. We act as the Scottish Council of the European Movement UK. I serve on the National Council, as it's called for UK, which Richard mentioned. And in terms of European Movement International, it's EMUK that's the member, because it's only open to states to join the European movement as national councils. But we, as EM in Scotland, can play a full role through EMUK in that organisation. Indeed, I was part of the EMUK delegation to the virtual conference this year, which Richard mentioned. At the moment, there are people in Scotland who, join the European movement, UK, not realising that's not going to get them automatically involved in what we do, and people who join European movement in Scotland aren't always aware of what's happening in European movement UK, but we have been developing an agreement which has now been agreed with the European Movement UK, where we have a reciprocal membership arrangement where those of our members who wish to join European Movement UK will automatically be able to do so if they wish, and vice versa. Members of European Movement UK in Scotland can join our organisation if they wish, so we can work even more closely together. And the second preliminary point, the very important point, perhaps importantly for our two guests, is to restate again that our starting point is that without any hesitation, our view is that European Movement in Scotland believes that Scotland should become once again part of the European Union, whether that is by Scotland as an independent state joining the EU, or by Scotland as part of a wider UK itself joining the EU, whichever way forward that the Scottish constitutional debate takes us. And we have a broad range of views around our organisation, so we don't take a view as an organisation on those constitutional options, but whichever way things go, we want Scotland to be part of the EU, whether in its own right or as part of the wider UK. And one of the things that we have been working very hard at is to encourage the maintenance of those existing links with those countries that are still fortunate enough to be in the EU, and to build upon those, to make people appreciate and to take advantage of the links that we have had, and how it's important to keep ourselves within the European mainstream, when we know there are some people who want to make us diverge from Europe and to move away, if not physically, but philosophically, politically, culturally, in as many ways as possible. And we want to maintain those links. We want to encourage organisations, businesses, government, trade unions, civic society, academic institutions to maintain and develop those links. And we ourselves want to maintain and develop those links with our fellow members of the wider European movement family, which is why tonight's seminar is particularly important. One immediate way that we think we can have those links developed, maintained and strengthened is through the campaign for, in our case, educational institutions in Scotland, not just universities, but other bodies involved in training and schools and the rest of it, to be able to take part in a continuing basis in the Erasmus programme. We have a campaign we've launched there. I won't go into in detail tonight. We had a webinar on that a few weeks ago, but it's certainly something we want to happen, and we are working with our colleagues in Wales for Europe, hopefully with the European movement at UK level, and we would also hope that the European movement international would help in from their perspective, to encourage the European Commission to think about ways in which our different organisations, or the institutions in our different countries can take part in that programme, which is really important as a way of maintaining practical and concrete links between the UK, hopefully the UK as a whole, but certainly if not the UK as a whole, bits of the UK and European organisations and institutions through the Erasmus programme. So that's something here and now which we're involved in, that we hope to be able to pursue and get support from at a wider level throughout Europe as well. Noelle talked about the webinars which we've organised, not webinars, but joint events we organised with European Movement Ireland over a number of years. That's something which perhaps with our focus on Brexit inevitably, and also with the situation under the pandemic, we haven't really been doing much recently, but I hope from today we can actually talk about doing more things jointly with European Movement in Ireland, and learning from their experiences as well, and also giving us some pointers to how we can, obviously in a context where the Northern Irish Ireland Protocol is a matter of some debate, to put it mildly, at the moment, where we should be talking together and working and informing ourselves at a minimum, but also, in our case, going on with information to lobby and work, put all that pressure we can on our government to have a constructive approach to make the arrangements between the UK and EU work. And don't forget, of course, it's not just an issue for the border in the south of England. There is a semi-border, of course, Stranraer at the moment, with, of course, the relationship between Ireland, Northern Ireland and Scotland. So there's issues there we can discuss and we can talk about as well. And I think we in Scotland have really every reason to participate and contribute as best we can in whatever ways we can to this discussion about the future of the conference itself, but also the ongoing debates and discussions that take place. I very much take on board Noelle's point. We shouldn't allow ourselves to we shouldn't allow Europe to forget about us. Europe doesn't want to forget about us, but if we're not there having our say and taking part in the debates, inevitably we have a lower profile. So whatever happens for the future of Scotland, it's important to maintain and develop those links as well. And after all, the European Movement International isn't just open to European Union countries. There are 34 states within the European Movement International. Some of those are ones which want to join the European Union. Others are ones like Norway, which have still the European movement wants it to join, but obviously rejoining the joining the EU is not at the moment a high priority in Norwegian politics. So there's open countries as well outside the EU who take an active role. So I would certainly like to see us in the Scotland and in the UK as a whole doing that more so. And it's good to see that the European Movement UK is now playing, I think, a more active role in the European Movement National than it had done for some time, again, no doubt because of the focus on the Brexit experience. And that takes me to a point where I'd like to make some comments about the wider European movement across Europe. And I think, as Noelle has referred to, we have had the experience after the Brexit referendum and in the campaign for a people's vote here in the UK. We found that we had developed in the UK as a whole, but particularly here in Scotland, the biggest mass pro-European movement anywhere in the European Union. And I don't think anywhere else in Europe at the moment you have seen the million people coming out on the streets, so hundreds of thousands and 3 or 4 demonstrations, the thousands of activities taking part across the country. And I remember perhaps one of the points which highlights that commitment, was the famous Highland bus to London, one of the demonstrations, where I think it was a 15-hour journey each way. I think I quite enjoyed myself on the bus, by the way, but nevertheless, that's the degree of commitment. And when I think of the delegation from Orkney, who spent 6 hours getting to Inverness Street and joined a bus, as a little example of a kind of enthusiasm that we saw in that campaign. And obviously, that happened because, of course, people wanted to do something about the horrific situation that they found after the Brexit referendum. And I'm sure if we'd been able to mobilise that enthusiasm before the referendum, the result would have been different. But I think everyone in the European movement, everyone watching this webinar, I'm sure knows full well that there are many in the world who want to see the EU broken up or become weaker, who hope that Brexit will not be the only time that a country has a movement outside the European Union. Now, we know that at the moment, the lessons of Brexit that most people in Europe have taken is that we don't want to go through it ourselves. But no one should have any illusion, it seems to me, and I'm sure no one in the European movement has any illusion, that there's always a threat for those who want to undermine the European project, gaining support in other countries as well. And I think that one of the things, a suggestion for the European Movement International, is how it can actually become or encourage that type of mass involvement across Europe that we were able to get, in hindsight, after referendum here in the UK. I think Noelle and Richard will know that in some countries, there is a strong European movement section in that country. In other countries, it's not strong, to put it mildly. And in some countries, it's strong, but it's very much an organization of leading politicians, business, trade union, civic society. It's not really a mass popular movement. And that's something which I think, if we want to build Europe into a wider sense, we've got to, across Europe, think about how we can now develop a real popular mass movement across Europe to promote European cooperation, European values, to strengthen the European Union as well. Because we all know, and I'll close on this, that in recent times in particular, there are a lot, unfortunately, of leaders, not just within the UK, but across the European Union as well, who are not delivering the type of vision and leadership which Europe needs both inside and outside of the EU. And if that's not going to come from politicians, then we who are supportive of a European ideal, who want to see Europe working together, tackling the issue that it needs to tackle in Europe and worldwide, then we can do what we can to encourage those type of policies, progressive cooperation across Europe, and having a strong popular movement across Europe is one of the ways that we can get the right type of leadership coming from our politicians and our political institutions in the EU and beyond. And the European movement can play a crucial role in doing that. It's a federation organization. Each country must go at its own pace. I know that, but I would strongly urge those who are leading the European movement international to think about ways how we can encourage that type of mass movement developing and growing, so we don't have it developing in retrospect after Brexit or similar types of problems elsewhere within Europe. And with that, I look forward to the discussion for the rest of the time we have tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, for that very equally positive, but also very realistic analysis about what's going on, and for effectively starting off the. You've started off the Q&A session as well, it seems to be, with your final series of questions. So I think I should ask Noelle first, and then Richard, how they would respond to Mark's questions. I mean, what role can the EMI play in developing this sort of a much more enthusiastic support for Europe, and develop the case for the EU, which, after all, we know is, let's face it, having its own few problems at the moment, with the vaccination rollout, which we haven't mentioned at all. Yesterday, the EPP had to say goodbye to one of its members, Fidesz from Hungary. The very strong role, a lot of reservations about the role of Poland as well as Hungary. So, what can the EMI do to generate that kind of grassroots, basic mass movement or enthusiasm for Europe?
Thanks, David. Richard, I might go first and then you can jump in and actually demonstrate the practical examples, because as I keep reminding my EM International colleagues, it is a very sad irony that the UK has the largest pro-European membership base out of any of the European movements. You know, it's just I don't know, it is, and it's a challenge, I suppose, to David, to what you and Mark very eloquently posed. I have to be honest and just say that a lot of the different European movements in the EU member states more broadly vary in size and scope. And I think, I mean, it's a bit boring to talk about the internal stuff, but I think it might be useful just for the audience to be aware of the structure and setup. So for example, in some countries like in Ireland, I have a team, there's about 13 of us here, and we get funding from the Irish Exchequer, and we have competed for projects and tenders. In Germany, our German colleagues, their membership base is made up of the trade associations and the membership organizations. So say, for example, the Automobile Trade Union Association will be members of European Movement Germany. They also get federal funding. Denmark and Finland is somewhat of similar to ourselves in terms of the size, the scope and the funding. Whereas in other member states and in other countries, the national European movements are voluntary associations. They don't have a paid staff, and the funding structure isn't there. So the challenges in terms of how to capture what you have very successfully done in Scotland and in the UK more widely is to tap into that sentiment. And sadly, I think we are a little bit complacent and we take things for granted. And sadly, you have seen the levels of the demonstrations and the marches, but that all happened after Brexit, you know. Like I remember talking in London and just sharing the experiences of how we in Ireland did 9 EU referenda, and our population here is 5 million. And, you know, as I looked out over London, I said, yes, I am talking to you and telling you about how we have done 9 EU referenda, and our population in the city of London, the whole country would fit in it probably, and, you know, still wouldn't twice over. So the challenge is to learn the lessons from Brexit for the wider European movement, and to not be complacent. And as I say in a lot of my speeches, I say we tend to Europeanize success, Europeanize failure and nationalize success. And I think our politicians of all hues are very adept at doing that. But it is a challenge, and it is not going to be easy. And I am concerned about the growth in Euroscepticism, the challenges to democracy, the rule of law, particularly in some of our eastern neighbours. But I was always struck, and Richard, I'll shut up after this, Richard, and let you jump in. But I was actually asked to present to our Lithuanian colleagues as to how Ireland did civil society, participatory democracy, how European Movement International, European Movement Ireland set up. So when I was in Vilnius and I was speaking to colleagues there, the first thing they said to me was, you know, it's not just Ireland. Ireland doesn't have monopoly rights on being really sad and upset about Brexit. And I said, okay, tell me more. And they saw the UK as a really prime defender of their right to democracy, of safeguarding them. They said, look at who is our biggest next door neighbor, you know. So I suppose Brexit, I am guilty of it. We tend to look at it through Irish lens or through the two islands lens more broadly, but it has ramifications and an impact across the wider EU, and the challenges of converting those lessons from Brexit into, Mark, as you put it up to us, wider pro-European movement membership. It's not easy. Hopefully the conference on the future of Europe might do that, but I think we're in we're in a tricky, difficult position, and especially with the pandemic as well. There's a lot of public unrest, angst, unease, unhappiness, and the EU can be an easy bogeyman target.
Richard?
I think, Mark, you've set us a very, very difficult challenge there. I mean, you get people out on the streets, you get 1 million people out on the streets where there's a cause, an identifiable cause. And that, of course, is the terrific challenge. That we only got 1 million people out onto the streets when there was an absolute cause to try to reverse Brexit. Very, very difficult to get those people out when there isn't something you want to overturn. So I think it's very difficult. Here's a few thoughts, a few shreds of hope, if you like. Youth, critical. I think that the proportion of young people who understand Europe and are pro-Europe and realize how vital it is for their future is very high. And I think that the mobilization of youth is critically important. At the European Movement UK, we have the Young European Movement, which actually I've been a little bit involved in trying to regenerate it, because it also, post-Brexit, has not been an effective operation, but it is regenerating. And the more and more the problems emerge, I think, from Brexit, I think the stronger that force will get across all universities. And things like Erasmus are an enormous generator, I think, of fury and anger, which is the sort of thing necessary to get people out on the streets. Within Europe itself, there is also JEF, the Jeunesse Européenne Fédéraliste, which actually is an organization which is a member of EMI, and which is in fact a partner with the European Movement UK in relation to the Young European Movement. So we are working with them to try to get to energize things in that way, and they are a very active organization. So youth is one answer. As Noelle says, I think the Conference on the Future of Europe is another. It's a huge opportunity, because part of what EMI will set out to do, its real obligation, is to try to identify citizens' opinions on the future of Europe, individuals' opinions. And so by whatever means EMI is able to do this, whether it's national assemblies in every European country or whatever it is, and it's still being worked on, this is an opportunity to try to galvanize the sort of popular pro-EU movement that you want. Just one sort of slightly wider philosophical thought. Is the EU too passive in its very nature? I mean, the EU exists and was set up to prevent things happening, to prevent war, to prevent barriers to trade, to prevent barriers to the freedom of movement, to prevent lawlessness and tyranny and terrorism. And again, it's a hell of a challenge to get people on the streets for a preventative purpose as opposed to an actively engaging purpose. And I think in this sense, the political committee that Noelle chairs, that I sit on, Europe and the World, is particularly important, because if you like, Europe and the World is the outgoing, energetic, external looking arm of Europe and the European Union. And I think that using the power of Europe, the influence of Europe in relations with other countries, and the importance of doing it in relation to, say, China, Russia, other parts of the world with undemocratic governments, is an opportunity for rallying mass support. A common enemy is what's needed to get people on the streets.
A common enemy, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, we know. I can think of plenty of common enemies. Anyway,
Find the common enemy, and I'll get people on the streets for you.
So, I think indeed. Well, I
Aliens.
think,
Now that would get people on the streets.
exactly. Well, that's very interesting, and I think you raised the topic for an entire webinar there on your own at the end there about what about the EU, and it brings me on to the kind of the future of which some of us have mentioned already, the Conference on the Future of Europe, and Mark was talking about, and you mentioned as well, Richard, there about Erasmus, and it is a big issue, and for those in Scotland, it's a particularly big issue as well. Not just those in Scotland, but we are particularly engaged in it, and we were campaigning on it. And how can there was a question here about how can EMI engage with us, for example, in issues like that, and in the wider UK itself on the Conference on the Future of Europe, given that, for example, Scotland is, we heard on the Erasmus question, Ursula von der Leyen said very klipp und klar, as they would say in German. She said, that Scotland could ask to rejoin the Erasmus program, Nein danke, because you are not you're not a member state, you're a sub-state, you have no right to join. So is there any way in which EMI can help us, do you think, in that kind of campaign? And also get countries like Scotland, which are admittedly for the moment, we may go on to another question, sub-states, to get more fully involved in the future of Europe?
I expect that Noelle actually has got more experience of the EMI to be able to answer that question better. Do you want to start, Noelle? I mean, I'll go if you like, but
no problem, Richard. So in terms of well, the Erasmus, I know from speaking privately to very senior people in the Commission and elsewhere, there was a real genuine sadness that the UK opted to not choose to go with the Erasmus. There was real, it's not a secret. I think, people like Barnier and Vice President of the European Commission, Šefčovič, have said it, that it was the UK decided not to. The offer was there, and I just think it's really unfortunate and unnecessary that was done. I see that as being limiting the horizon and the scope of so many young people coming behind, and it's really difficult. And in terms of getting EM International to advocate for that, is I think you've got to, David, you and your colleagues have to keep putting forward that viewpoint, that perspective, and keep engaging with your MEPs, with the European Parliament, but with the MEPs and the different, as Richard touched upon as well, the different institutions. But it is a lot harder. It is a lot harder when you are outside and when you are not a member. And that is something that, for many years, to be very honest and frank, the UK, it was a challenge for the UK to actively get involved and engage, notwithstanding fantastic people like Veronica, and I know she's on the call, and others. The UK institutionally wasn't, I feel, to be honest, wasn't as strongly represented as the size as it should be, as what would be a large member state from an Irish perspective. So it was an anomaly that I think is a challenge to reverse. I don't know, Richard, if you want to come in.
Yes, just to add just one general point. I think that you're probably talking here about treaty change. I mean, this is what, to enable something like Scotland to join Erasmus. And one of the things we have done just in the last few days, where EMI has been taking its position on the Conference on the Future of Europe, is we have put in a very clear statement that we believe that this conference should not exclude the possibility of treaty change, and that should not be sort of ultra vires the conference. And I think that we've also inserted, actually, Noelle, of course, the thing I raised at the conference, an additional clause which does state that we think that the conference should embrace thinking about the structure of the EU and the extent to which it may be, the current structure may be limiting its effectiveness in the outside world, and indeed even with its relationships with member states. And I'm not really talking particularly about the UK here. The UK is an obvious example, but these earlier ideas of concentric circles that maybe there can be more of an inner core of federalists, if you like, and then people with looser relationships, which seems to me could well include a sub-state participating in certain programs. But I'm afraid it's that fundamental. I mean, I think it would probably need treaty change to achieve the sort of things you were thinking about.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, we have put the statement, the EMI statement on the Conference on the Future of Europe is on our website. I put it up there today. So, we're involved in that. Can I ask now, Mark, do you have anything to say, or would you like to just, fine. There's a question here from, you talked about a slight slip of the tongue about our MEPs, Noelle, but a former MEP and now an MP, Alan Smith, who's very closely involved with us, has talked about the fact that, there's a kind of, and Richard, I think Richard referred to this as well, is how can we keep the kind of discussion of the workings of the EU? How can we kind of keep that going? Are there ways in which, he says that this is something close to my heart, UK news organizations are pulling back their Brussels correspondents. Does the panel have any practical views on ways in which we can boost this discussion and keep the Brits and the Scots, and Scots here in particular, engaged in the discussions which are going on in Europe about, not just about what's going on in Europe, but also Europe's relations with the world, as you say, given, the rise of China, a different regime in America, problems in Russia, all those things. What can we do? What can you do? What can EMI do?
That's a fantastic question. And hello, Alan, had the pleasure of meeting him in Dublin in person. And I think it's a really, really good point. And it's something we've been concerned about as well from an Irish perspective, that a lot of the Irish media outlets were doing the same. I mean, obviously, we're very fortunate that we have somebody of the caliber, for example, of RT's Tony Connolly, the journalist, David, that you'd approve of, maybe, that I think he made stock markets move with some of his Brexit leaks and with his scoops on that. But it's hugely important that and this is a concern I'd have, and I'd love to kind of continue to engage with EMiS on this and EMUK. We can't allow it to become normalized that Scotland, that the UK doesn't have a voice on European issues, and that it disengages, disentangles itself, removes itself, and the media has such an important role to play on that. When I took over in EM Ireland, our tagline here in this organisation originally was, we campaign to have European issues discussed in Ireland every day and not just on referendum day. Now, the reverse is almost the case, because the EU and European matters have such a prevalence, be it on Brexit, on the COVID vaccination, on the stimulus, Next Generation EU, the growth and stability. All those aspects are really seeing a preponderance of EU issues discussed. Notwithstanding that, we need to make sure that the caliber and the quality of journalism, it's supported and it's publicly funded. And that's why, David, we have had a Future of the Media Commission taking place here in Ireland over the last couple of weeks, and that will present and outline its reports. But it's a real challenge of maintaining, as Alan says, that familiarity. and battling to get airspace for European, more mundane, routine matters in English language media is a huge challenge. And like I've been told by, you know, really senior people in media, it's just not sexy. It's not important enough. And in a weird way, Brexit was, because it was a little bit like a soap opera. So it was getting covered, you know, it's the flip side of it. So that's why for us, we are continually trying to ensure that we provide platforms for misinformation busting. We don't want Ireland to go down an Ire-Exit path. The vast majority of Irish media comes, a lot of it comes from the UK. So it's something that we are very, very mindful of.
Mm.
And I think there's an onus and a responsibility on, we'll say, the Scottish media side of it, to Alan's question, to ensure that at least a half a page somewhere is kept either digitally or in the hard copy print to report and focus on that, because that then feeds into the point I was saying about don't let us forget you.
Yeah.
We can't allow that to be institutionalized and normalized. That's my big worry and concern.
Well, okay, fine. We won't. I can assure you of that. But Richard, have you got anything to say? Particularly, actually, funny enough, a question from another ex-MEP, John Purvis, you know, saying, how about talking to, you know, can we get out of our own bubble? I mean, here we are, pro-EU, talking to ourselves. What about talking to all the skeptics? What about swinging public opinion around to the, you know, the whole case you were making yourself earlier for rejoining?
I think we've got to be a bit patient. I think that we lost the theoretical argument about Brexit when, rather dismissed as Project Fear, when we alerted people to what might happen. And I think we're now in the world of realities. We're in a different world from what we were a year ago. Now the realities of Brexit exist, and already we've seen a lot of them already. And they are the opportunities for the rebuilding brick by brick, because each brick that thuds into the ground and explodes in pieces, whether it's the Northern Ireland Protocol, whether it's musicians not being able to travel across Europe, whether it's problems with the city and passporting and so on, our importance will grow. Initially, there will be a lot of individual lobbies for all these individual bricks. Musicians have their own very strong lobby. The city has enormously powerful lobbies. And haulage firms have enormously, you know, I mean, all these places where things are going wrong have their own professional lobbies. We can't and shouldn't compete with them. We can support them and be there in the background. But our job is about the entire edifice. And as the realities become more and more clear and more spread, our role will become more and more important, because it's then that one can bring all these things together and say, look, it's not just a problem for the city. It's not just a problem for creative people. It's not just a problem for lawyers who can't get their qualifications recognized. There are myriad problems here. And this is why our relationship with Europe must be restored. So I say have a bit of patience. I think that the European movement, whether it's European Movement International or whether it's EM UK or EM Scotland or EM Ireland, will become more and more important.
Mark?
Yes, just one point I would make is that the media world will, to some extent, reflect, well, to a great extent, reflect what is in the wider debate within the political community. If MPs and politicians are not talking positively about Europe, then or not talking about it at all, that is then going to be reflected in the media not covering those debates and discussions as well. So I think one of the things, and something we can all call for our own MPs and our own representatives to do, is to make sure that some of the myths which are being propagated by some of the anti-EU forces within the UK are actually challenged and answered and directed, and criticism directed within Parliament and within the fields in which politicians at that level operate, and that then gets reflected in the media. And at the moment, and I won't say any parties in particular. There are people who really just wish that Europe would go away. It's too much of an embarrassing issue to talk about now. Well, that needs to be challenged. Some MPs do, some don't, but we can certainly challenge that as individuals also who want to see better relations with the EU, whatever form it might take.
Of course, yeah, thank you very much. Yes, and of course, while we're making, Noelle was talking about, Brussels not being sexy story. One person who does know about that, of course, is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Does he make his Brussels stories very sexy by making them all up? Entirely, about 90% of his stories were entirely fake. But anyway, that's enough. This one, we've only got a few minutes now, and here's the last kind of like a little kind of bomblet to throw into the thing. Quite a few questions saying, and this is for our guests, I think, how well an independent Scotland would be accepted by EU policymakers. And is there anything that EMI, and indeed Ireland actually, perhaps, Noelle, can do to support Scotland in its bid for independence whilst just waiting, seamlessly to rejoin the EU or join the EU as an independent state in the future?
I don't know if we've any Father Ted fans, but I feel like answering saying that would be an ecumenical matter. No, I'm teasing. Yeah, that's a really interesting one, and there's I think it's obviously a decision for Scotland. I mean, far be it. I suppose far be it as an Irish person with our own constitutional arrangements here. I think it has, looking at it, if I can, from the other side of the Irish Sea, it's been really interesting watching the debate. I certainly think Brexit has expedited the process massively, and inevitably, and how you go about how it's done. And in terms of referendum, I know obviously in terms of the second referendum on this, I think it's how you, I suppose, it's to look at it as well in the broader context, because this is a particular issue that has ramifications, impacts on Ireland, on our own north-south arrangements. And interesting, I was asked to present to European Movement Spain, as Richard knows, last week, and similar to an event like this, they're very mindful of the Scottish question, if I can put it that way, through their own particular lens as well. So I think it would be, and I'm sure you all are, but I just would just add that mindfulness and awareness of the other side of it. EM Ireland, the wider European Movement International will always welcome and is in favour of enlargement and the rejoining aspect. The constitutional thing will have to be respected, but it's one that how, from an Irish perspective, officially and institutionally, how is that done? Obviously, Ireland is very mindful of existing arrangements and that are in place, but it's certainly one that we will be watching very closely here as well.
Thank you very much. Very diplomatic. Now, last word perhaps from the independence movement for Kent, from Richard.
I think I've just got to appeal to you Scots for your loyalty to the million people out on the streets for the people's vote, to all the people like me who couldn't bear to lose you, and to imagine us left without our Scottish allies in trying to recover our position with Europe. We need you very, very badly. So just as I tell Brits, get involved with Europe, I have to say to you, stay deeply involved with the whole of the UK, please. We need you.
Mark, would you like to respond to that? behalf of the European, of the people of Scotland and the European movement in Scotland.
I don't think I'm half the people of Scotland. I mean, I think I explain our position because, I mean, genuinely there is a range of views within our movement in Scotland, and it's just not a question of, well, it is a question of sitting on a fence, but it's for good reason, in that we want to make sure whatever outcome there is one that ends up being pro-European as much as possible and the greatest extent possible, and that is why we need support of us to keep our movement in Scotland together. And certainly, if there was to be an independence referendum, we would certainly be campaigning for that independent Scotland to be part of the EU. And if there is not, that doesn't happen, then we'll be campaigning for the UK to rejoin, and pending that time, to ensure the UK maintains as closest links with the EU, but also that those parts of the UK that want closer links should be able to develop them, ideally governmentally, but also through civic society as well. And that is something which we will also pursue. So we will advance a pro-European cause in all directions in any way possible.
Okay. Well, we've come to the end, I'm afraid. In fact, there are several very good questions still inside, to be answered, but we don't have time to pose them. They'll have to wait for another time, unfortunately. Can I thank very much Noel and Richard, our guests for the, the nice, the candid and the, friendly and supportive manner in which they've talked to us this evening, and some of the insights and some of the passion as well, which they brought to, the European cause is not dead, far from it. And I think that, we here will be pursuing it ourselves. And no, watch this space. We, you said, don't forget, don't make you forget us. Don't worry, we'll be back with a big bang over the next few months and years. And can I just say at the end that thanks to all the people who took part, and for the questions you put, which were, as I say, were very good. Sorry we couldn't put all of them. You should be getting subsequently an email from us asking, you for your feedback about what, about this webinar, and about ways in which it could be improved, and as well as how much you enjoyed it, which I'm sure you did. And obviously, if you're not a member of EMiS and you want to become one, please do go to the website and do so. Anyway, thank you very much, all of you. Look forward to the next match between Scotland and Ireland. And
I'm not.
and I'm sure we're going to win it this time. And so wait for that. And I hope, Richard, you've got over the the defeat at Twickenham earlier. And Mark, I'm not certain if Mark's a rugby fan or not. Anyway, never mind. Thank you all very much indeed, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Richard. Bye bye.